Hello to everybody tuning in. My name is Allison and I'm on the team at Business for Peace. I'm in our office here in Oslo, Norway, joined by Johan of Urban Sharing. He's our Chief Technology Officer and one of the co-founders. We thought we would come online for a quick 20-30 minute conversation to talk about micromobility and how cities are changing. For those of you that have been following us for a while, you'll recognize Johan from the Future of Cities talk that we did back in January 2019. We thought this would be a really good time to revisit that conversation as the pandemic has completely changed the way that we're existing within our cities, and hopefully micromobility is part of the solution as we rebuild going forward. So Johan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
Great. For anyone who's not familiar, could you start by just talking about urban sharing and the concept of micromobility?
Sure, yeah. So we provide software for micromobility, what's typically called fleet management systems, which sounds very cryptic, but it's really all the tools you need when you have thousands of vehicles out in the city to know where they are, where they should be, how to repair them, how they're unlocked by customers, all those little tools we built. And that's something that was born out of the things we built for the city bikes in Oslo. So, but the term micromobility, because that's really what we support, shared micromobility, that's a term that's evolved over the last 3 to 4 years, and it's I find it to be a very helpful term in understanding what these small vehicles do. And when I say small vehicles, it's typically less than 500 kilos. That relates to how it's regulated, but also the footprint they take up in the city it's not much more of a human being compared to like a car, which takes up a lot of space, and then a lot of these small vehicles have what I like to call superpowers, which that they are electric, so they amplify, the power you put in as a human. They're often intelligent, they're often shared, and all of this gives them a utilization grade and a performance that is really interesting in cities that are becoming congested.
And so we mean bikes, scooters.
Exactly, e-bikes, and I think it's fun to see all of the new things that kind of are evolving, because kind of just like with the phone and the iPads and the phablets and all that, we're in that kind of phase where we're trying to figure out what is the right configuration. Do we sit? Do we stand? Is it big? Is it small? What is the right balance between, how flexible or how safe it is? So we're in that kind of exploratory phase of this new vehicles being born.
Cool. Very interesting.
It is.
Yeah, seems like a fun field to be.
Absolutely.
But I guess like every field, things are changing right now across the globe. So how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected micromobility and urban transport?
Right. So this is very regional. So there's been very different responses, and some of them are kind of conflicting or surprisingly opposite. So just here locally in Norway, you would see in Oslo, the city would ask that, micromobility was improved or released earlier than planned. Like with the city bikes, it was asked to open earlier to accommodate the need, whereas in Trondheim they asked for a lockdown. So I think it was early on there was a little bit of confusion, like what is the right response. But I think the general trend you see throughout globally is public transport has gradually been reduced, both out of individual kind of fear and worry, but also publicly it's kind of been shut down a bit, and then given all of the home office use, there's also been less travel. But so you saw a dip where there was a lot less use of micromobility too. But if you look at some of the regions that are kind of on the other side of the first wave, there's an incredible boom. Like I just saw the numbers from Beijing, which is now in a pretty good state. They see 187% increase from pre-COVID-19. So. And I anticipate that to go down a little bit, but I think that says something about that people are still reluctant to go into and be crammed 200 people into a bus, right?
Yes, and might be for a while. Yeah.
Very much so.
In our pre-conversation, you mentioned a fun word, pedestrianization of cities. Yeah. Is that related to COVID, or is that coming out of this?
Absolutely. So that's, as sort of like an urbanist nerd, that's what I love to follow, is how this has allowed cities to respond a lot quicker than you would in a normal situation where things takes forever to regulate and plan. So you see a lot of what I like to call sort of like pop-up bike lanes, because they wanted more space. So I think Berlin was one of the cities that they increased their bike lanes to be another 1.5 meters to give more capacity and space. In Bogota in Colombia, they just shut down car lanes and just let people use them as for for biking. And I think both in Paris and a couple of other cities, they just increased their caps for scooters and bikes for shared fleets, and just kind of rapidly evolve the kind of track they were already on. And I think that's, if you want to look at sort of the positive flip side of these crises and like pandemic response, it allows you to fast track some of the things you want to achieve in the city.
That's great. It's nice to see people out on the streets more and have more space for
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah.
I think my hometown's done that as well, of people just saying we need space to walk if you want us to keep meters apart
Absolutely.
from each other.
But I mean, it's not like we're not coming back to public transport. Obviously, that is the backbone of a city. But I think, especially if you look at micromobility, like walking and also like better pedestrian options, it's kind of helping that recovery part of getting back to normal, getting back to public life, right?
That's great. So then switching gears a little bit, and I don't mean to make mobility puns at all, but at Business for Peace, we're really interested in how businesses contribute to positively changing society and reshaping things.
Sure.
So what is the best business model? How does the business sector get involved in these sort of positive changes that you're talking about?
I think that's a good question right now, because it's an interesting moment to kind of reflect upon whether the current business model was actually sustainable enough. Because you've seen a lot of the startups, especially in the scooter industry, that was purely private. They were kind of running what I like to call the Uber model, where you basically just like move in with your stuff without working with the city at all. Those are also the first ones to go, because once there's a drop in usage, it doesn't make money anymore, and they're gone. And I think the worst examples we've seen is like the company Jump, which have some of the greatest bikes in the market. It was not like a profitable unit within Lime, and then they decided just to trash all the bikes.
Just trash.
Yeah, just like, I mean, they probably did the proper recycling of it, but in a situation where there's like a huge demand for e-bikes, they decide to put like a whole fleet of 20,000 bikes out. They obviously came back because they got a lot of PR backlash. But the point is, I mean, that shows that we need to have models that is not purely set up for like, that margins. It needs more resilience in it. Yeah. And that's why a lot of the discussions around, what's typically referred to as P3, the public-private partnerships models, are kind of now improving. And I'm very happy to see that, because transport in itself is not a big money maker. Right. It's always been subsidized. We need to spend money to achieve the political goals we want. And I think a lot of, if we improve how we work with private and public companies in this, so that we actually subsidize in the ways that can get us through crisis like that, we make for a lot more sustainable models. So this is a very personal hope in this, is that on the other side of this, we have much more improved both models, tender, documents, and discussions on how we make private business model work with the public need of transport.
Are there cities already doing that well? Is there sort of an example?
Yeah, I mean, Milan, which is a city we're launching in, they have responded by increasing the caps. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, caps is something that's used a lot in micromobility, where how many bikes or scooters you're allowed to put on the street. Okay. And then the city respond by increasing that cap, which allow that company to make more money, but also meet the city goals of moving more people onto that. So that's what I'm hoping to see more of, is that you have cities using their measures and tools to actually, improve the relationships to these private companies.
Great, it's good to hear that it's going.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
anecdotal, small examples now, but I think this also mature that discussion, 3 years and 3 months, as with a lot of things these days.
Yeah, conversations are changing so quickly right now, so who knows what we'll be saying in 6 months. Hopefully good things. So I wanted to pick up on another big thing happening globally, is conversations about inclusion, which of course is very important. You've talked in the past about, and I wrote this down, inherent democratization in micromobility. Can you tell us more about that concept and your hope for more inclusive cities?
Sure. And I think micromobility is a lot more like dynamic and flexible in how we work. And we can also tune it to actually meet more specific goals than you can with a train. A train basically just runs, right? So last time I think we discussed, some of the biases that are in transport and gender specifically. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've been happy to see now in the last 3 months is how micromobility has been used to help health workers, first responders, people who work in public transport. A lot of companies have made their vehicles free for those workers, and you can also work with optimizing to get people to that hospitals and such, and I think that proves to us that this has the potential to work with specific groups or to meet specific transport goals. Right now, that is a pandemic response and to a very specific group. But if you take that same concept, you can also work with other groups. Use the same measures later and look at things like, should this be looked at as sort of like a welfare option?
Right.
Make it available if you can't afford, your own car or transport. Maybe you can make it, increase your mobility options. And I think that's, I met with an insurance company a year back, and they were actually thinking about making a mobility insurance product because they'd done research on if you lose your ability to move around the city, things quickly fall apart. You don't get to that job interview, you don't get to work, you don't get to pick up your kids at school. So, and I think, starting to look at these things as something, as a very basic need you have. And I mean, you have all this discussion about, universal income right now.
Yes.
And I think looking at mobility as also something that is close to a right we want to provide in society, and we can do now, do that at a very low cost. And if we help people to get to where they need to go, there's a much better chance, they'll achieve their other goals and, or general life quality.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective that it is sort of tied into what is that base service and base
Exactly,
quality of life.
But to me, this all comes back to the general idea of public transport. And I think, if you look at the first wave of boom of micromobility now, is very driven by, early adopters, private companies, and it proves what it can be done. But the next phase obviously has to be a lot about, how do we think of this as public transport? How do we use this capability to meet the political goals of what public transport is supposed to solve, right?
That's great.
Obviously, this is a very European take on public transport, and I think, the reason why micromobility works so much better here is also that we are much more used to, using the bike lanes, and we're used to public transport. So the European market, in this sense, it's way ahead of the U.S. market.
So you say working better, it's more adopted? Or is
Yeah,
there
but I mean,
infrastructure
it comes with the infrastructure.
Yes.
So when you have bike lanes, you feel more safe. And when you're used to interact with traffic on a small vehicle, there's less accidents.
Yes.
So there's a lot of things that works with us in Europe to actually get here.
Right. Yeah, I remember visiting Montreal as a kid and seeing sort of sectioned off bike lanes with
Exactly.
curbs. I was like, that looks so safe.
Yep.
I would bike around this city.
But Montreal is almost a European city, right?
Yes. Yeah. But just, it's one of the first ones that I saw. And it was like, wow, this is a different way of getting around. Is there any other sort of trends or topics you wanted to touch on that we haven't covered?
No, but to me, this is one of the many conversations that is interesting now. Ones that, 3 months ago, we could only focus on, what is going to happen. Now we're at the point where I wouldn't say everything is under control, but it has taught us something about, how do we respond to this. This was a pandemic, but there's going to be earthquake, there's going to be political instability. We are living in times that will give this kind of uncertainty for cities.
Right.
And to me, I keep coming back to that, towards flexibility and resilience. How do we build that into our structures? Because a lot of our urban structures, both physical infrastructures or regulations or how we think about them, have been very fixed. They're very hard to change, and they're not responding. But for us who come from technology, we're used to building things that respond, things that happen in real time. There's a cause and an effect, right? And to me, this is a sign of something that we can build in a city that is actually able to respond and get us through things like this. And I think, that's what makes me really hopeful, is I've seen that so many examples of that through this, where next time, not this, but something similar with the same effect happen, we are a little bit better at that kind of response.
Yeah. And it's really nice to have such a hopeful conversation. And you're right, shocks are coming, more changes are coming. But I feel more positive now. Thank you. that there is people really working hard on being more mobile and having really positive solutions in difficult times.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope
Thank you.
was informative to everybody. And you can ask us questions online. We can comment there and respond. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.